everybody.
All right. The veteran whom we are interviewing today is Robert Brown, born February 15th, 1972, in Mobile, Alabama. He is presently a resident of Fairhope, Alabama. Robert served in the U.S. Army, 1st Armored Division, 1st Squadron, 1st Cavalry Regiment, with active service of 2 years and 6 months in the Gulf War and Desert Storm. He entered the service December 13th, 1990, and was discharged September 1992 with the rank of Specialist. He's received a number of decorations, 3 Army Achievement Medals, the Army Commendation Medal, National Defense Service Medal, Southwest Asia Service Medal, Humanitarian Service Medal, and the Saudi Arabia Liberation Medal. This interview is conducted at the Fairhope Public Library in Fairhope, Alabama on July 5th, 2011. The interviewer is Edward La Monte, and this interview is being conducted for the Veterans History Project in the American Folklife Center at the Library of Congress. Thank you very much for agreeing to do this, and congratulations on your achievements.
Thank you.
Let's begin by just asking you to reflect on your early years, where you were born, family, high school, thoughts of career when you were in high school, things like that.
As you stated, I was born in Mobile. I'm the youngest of 6 kids. Moved to the Fairhope area when I was in 4th grade in 84, somewhere in that range. My dad was an architect, so I always was around building and architectural plans, so I had an interest in that. Attended Fairhope High School, graduated in 1990, did my service time, and then once I was discharged, I went to Auburn University and got my degree, and then returned here and married my high school sweetheart, and fortunate enough to live here in Fairhope.
And what work are you doing here in Fairhope?
I'm a builder here locally, residential and commercial.
And do you and your wife have children?
Yes, we have 3 children. The oldest is Reed, is 11, daughter Ellie is 9, and youngest son James is 8.
And does your family have a history of people in military service?
My dad served in the Navy, and I currently have a brother that is a lieutenant colonel in the reserves, and I had another brother that served 2 years.
Okay. Now you mentioned that you graduated from high school and into the military. Tell us what prompted that particular move on your part. What drew you to military service, and reflect with us on your earliest experiences in the military, training, adjustment to military life, your personal responses to it, just to give us an idea of what this dramatic change was like for you.
Well, it was probably about 6 months before I graduated, and needed some direction on where I was going in my life. And the recruiting station used to be on the corner of Magnolia and Section Street. So I was on my way home from school one day, and I said, well, I'll just pull in here and see what they have to offer. And at that point, they said they needed cooks, and they needed 19 Delta Cav Scouts, and they showed me a video of some tanks jumping, landing in some water and shooting guns, and that seemed a little bit more exciting than stirring some food in a pot. So I signed up on the delayed entry program, graduated in June of 1990, and reported to basic training in Fort Knox, Kentucky on August of 1990. And the first thing drill sergeant said was, you know, you MFers, Saddam just invaded Kuwait. Will serve in the war, so you better be paying attention. So I did my basic training and then advanced training in Fort Knox, and finished training in early December, maybe late November of 1990. Came home for a week or so. Knew I was stationed in Germany, didn't know what unit I was stationed in, but I was to report to Frankfurt in December. So I flew out South Carolina, landed in Frankfurt, Germany. First time I'd seen snow, so it was all new to me. I was in a big warehouse, and they're calling out people's social security numbers and then what unit they're designated to. And they'd call out a social security number and what unit, and everybody in there would say, "Oh, they've already gone, they've already gone." So they called out my number and said I was 11 Cav, and oh, they're loaded up, they're gone. So it's all starting to kind of click that maybe I was really about to go serve in the war. Mm-hmm. So we load up in vans, and originally I was stationed in Ansbach, Germany, which is in southern Germany. There again, driving for about 3 hours in the snow, get down to the headquarters and unload our bags, and we check in with the CQ there. He says, "All right, boys, there was 3 of us that went through basic training that ended up in the same, actually in the same platoon." So he said, "Y'all are in Bravo troop. You're gonna walk down the path there, and it's the last barracks on the left." So we signed in, got our bags, and we're walking through the snow, and closer we get to the barracks, we can hear music. Like, well, must be a party going on. It's a Tuesday night. It's kind of strange for everybody to be up late. So we get down there, open up the doors, and they've got they got baby pools in the hallway filled up with ice and beer. Music's blaring out of all the rooms, and the guy at the CQ desk said, "You might as well drop your bags and grab a beer. We're leaving in 6 days." Mm. So that was December 13th of 1990, and so December 19th, I had 6 days. I got all my equipment issued, zeroed in my weapon, got all the shots I needed, and 6 days later got on a plane and flew to Saudi Arabia.
I'm interested, during this period of training, were you given some background on what the nature of the conflict was there and what America's interest is, what the United States' interest is?
No, we were not given anything. We were all just young kids trying to figure out what we were doing. So no, we didn't know any of the political background to what was going on.
So you're on the plane to Saudi Arabia. Why don't you continue? You're doing a wonderful job with the narrative, so just carry on.
We landed in Saudi Arabia, and all of our, like I said, everything had been loaded up by the time I got to Germany. As far as the vehicles, the unit I was in was an armored cavalry, and every platoon has 3 Bradley fighting vehicles, and then depending on what the unit is, it's either direct support is either with air or a tank, M1 tank, and the unit I was in had air support, so we had 2 Apache helicopters to each platoon. So everything had already been loaded up on the ships and shipped over there. So we get in Saudi Arabia, and about 3 days later, all the equipment starts showing up, but everything is green because that was the color of camouflage that you needed. Well, when it came off the ship, they had a big painting station. They just rolled the tank in there, and about 3 minutes later it came out, it was tan, and all the equipment was drugged through there and sprayed down tan. And we were stationed there for, I want to say it was late December, so we were there probably a couple of weeks in Saudi Arabia, getting all the equipment painted up and suited for the desert. And we pulled out of there one night. They loaded us up on buses, put all the vehicles on flatbed trailers, and we drove for about probably 3 or 4 hours. Stopped out in the middle of nowhere. It was pitch black. They unloaded us off the buses, and they got the Bradleys off the flatbed trailers, and we got on our vehicles and off the buses pulled, and there we sat out in the middle of nowhere. No moonlight, nothing, just pitch black. And so it's starting to sink in a little bit. There I was still 18 at this time, so it was all new to me. And we rolled out probably for about 2 hours in our vehicles, and we stopped. When the sun came up the next day, we set up our temporary grounds, and that's where we operated out of until the ground war started. So we set up all our tents and guard posts and everything. And during the day we do operations, and we come back there and do certain drills, and we stayed there. That was late December until probably about 2 weeks before the ground war started. And we picked up camp and rolled to where our starting point was for the ground attack.
And where was that?
We were about 60 miles southwest of Baghdad, and the unit I was with was the 7th Corps, 1st Armored Division. We were the westernmost unit of the 7th Corps. And how the war was strategized, if you picture Baghdad being the center of a watch, the Marines came from about 6 or 5 o'clock towards Baghdad, and then the 7th Corps, which I was in, was like the minute hand sweeping around the outside. You know, we had the furthest to travel to get back to Baghdad. So I can't remember how many hundreds of miles we traveled, but we set up, and about 3 days before the ground war started, we were about 60 miles from Baghdad, and we did the clockwise sweep in the backside of Baghdad.
What do you recall what you sort of literally felt like during this time before combat began and you were experiencing one new thing after another, probably just a stunning cultural adjustment? How were you emotionally dealing with these changes?
Like I stated, I was kind of numb to the situation, I guess, because I'd only been in the active military for maybe a month or a month and a half. So really, the idea of war or combat didn't have any effect during all this training and operations, and firing weapons and everything else. It still didn't sink in about what was going to happen. And then as we got closer, and we're traveling, like I said, a couple hundred miles, and then one night, our first engagement, we're rolling down probably about 5 or 10 miles an hour in the tank, and I say tank, it's a Bradley fighting vehicle, it's not an actual tank. There's 5 people, there's a driver, and there's a commander and a gunner in the turret, and then there's 2 loaders in the back. Myself being a private, I was in the back, and a loader. So we're riding in the back, and you've got commo helmets on, so you can hear what communication is going on between your vehicle and the other vehicles in your platoon. So we're just sitting like this, riding in the back of the tank, and then you hear, "Halt, halt." The vehicle comes to a stop, and the commander comes in and says, "We're in a minefield." And that's when what you call the pucker factor, that's when I was like, holy shit, this is real. This is what we've been training for. Mm-hmm. And so we backed out, and about 2 minutes later, artillery started coming in. So we navigated out of the minefield, and the way it's set up is they put the minefields in front of berms. They'll have berms 20 feet tall to slow you down. Well, and the minefield is also intended to slow you down, so they've got an eye watching on these positions, and whenever you get there, they know it's going to take you a couple minutes to figure out how to get out of it. So, and that's exactly what happened. We got in it. We're slowing down because we saw the berm, but then realized we're in a minefield as well. And we got out of the situation and around the berm, and then that was our first engagement of the ground war.
And how long did it continue?
It lasted a couple hours. I don't know we didn't take any casualties. Had one vehicle that was hit with the artillery, but nobody was injured or killed. So we got out of that, and the next couple of days, the ground war only lasted 3 days, so luckily wasn't a long battle. Next couple of days, like I said, we're continuing that clockwise motion towards the back of Baghdad, and the enemy we were fighting was a Republican Guard, was supposedly Saddam's top forces. So we engaged them that night and defeated them, and the next couple of days we probably took, I don't know, thousands of POWs. Most of them were willingly giving up, but some of them were resistant. hiding out in bunkers, compounds, and such as that. So then we had 2 more engagements the next day. There again, we didn't take any casualties and defeated them and kept on going.
And the POWs, how were they managed? What was your relationship to them, and where did they go?
Well, because we were the westernmost flank and had to travel the most distance, all we did was cleared, took their weapons or whatever they had, gave them a bottle of water and told them to keep walking, and then we had units behind us that were actually processing the POW, so I don't know what was actually done with them or where they were taken, but we were just making sure they couldn't,
What kind of relationships had developed among those of you who were in the unit?
It was a pretty tight relationship. Like I said, there was 5 of us, and we were in a tank for 2 months. Without, you stood on top of it to take a shower. You didn't get off of the tank because they didn't know what if there might be mines. So sleeping in the tank, eating in the tank, taking showers on top of the tank. So it was close quarters.
And during this time, were you in any way able to communicate with folks back home, or?
No, there was no communication at this point. Once the ground war ended, they set up a communication tent where they would rotate different platoons. It was probably maybe once a week you get to go back and call.
I would think that the experience of being in a confined space with other people for that long a period of time would be very, very stressful.
It was tense at times, but like I said, we were all had each other's back, so that was what the mission was.
Mm-hmm.
So everybody stayed focused.
And so the war itself continued for a short period of time.
Right, the war, like I said, was a couple days long, and then the night before the ceasefire, we were there again, probably 30 miles from Baghdad at this point. We were coming up on a valley, and we knew it was a pretty occupied valley where the enemy was known to be. And there again, I'm riding in the back, and you hear somebody say, "Halt!" And we stopped, and a vehicle spotted. I think there was three columns of T-72 tanks down in the valley. They were just barely moving. So we backed up to where we couldn't be identified, and called in the direct support from the helicopters. And that was a pretty awesome show of firepower. Being able to see that, riding, sitting in the back of the vehicle, turning around, and seeing the helicopters flying, about 20 feet off the ground. They come up, hover just above the ground, and you can hear their communication fire, and like synchronized swimmers, they all raised up to where they could spot the helicopters, fire hellfires, and then back down. And that lasted for about 30 or 45 minutes. And then the next morning, the ceasefire was called. And at that point, our mission was to guard the main highway that went from Baghdad to Crete. Saddam at that point was bombing Tikrit, the village. For whatever reason, Saddam was doing it, but he was bombing his own people.
Right.
Gassing them, right.
That was
gassing,
his home, wasn't it?
Right. And so we set up on the main highway and had a checkpoint where we checked every vehicle coming in and leaving Tikrit to make sure they weren't taking any supplies or anything to the Republican Guard that was still intact there. And we were there for probably 3 weeks. And one night after the bombing, we were sitting there. It was probably about 2:30, and I was on guard that night to check all the vehicles coming and going. And I could see sparks coming from down the highway. As it got closer and closer, there was a little Toyota truck that probably had 20 people in it, and they'd just been bombed. They had some kids that had taken some injuries, and so they pulled up there, and they ended up eating with us that night, and they slept there, and we had the medics come up and treat the kids that had shrapnel. And so I mean, it was was still real what was going on.
Was this your first direct encounter with people from the country itself?
Other than the military, yes. Yeah, we and they were, most of them were friendly when you stopped them. You know, you'd had to make them get out of the car and check the car, make sure there wasn't anything in there. Most of them were you know, friendly. Some of them not, but.
So then you continued in the region for a period after the battle stopped.
Right. Yes. Like I said, we stayed there for a while, and then that was our last mission. That was probably in late April. So we stayed there for a couple of months, and then went back to Saudi Arabia, and then flew out in late May.
And flew out to what?
Back to Germany.
And you completed your term of service then in Germany?
No, that was just the end of the combat. And then we got back to Germany, and that's where I spent my remaining time of active duty. Was stationed in Germany.
When you were out of the tank, but you were still in the area, and you had the camp and were doing the work that you did after the battle ended, what was life like in the camp? Did you have an opportunity to engage in recreation?
Yeah, we had
activities? Right.
Yes, we had. You know, still did your physical training in the morning, and you could, when you weren't on guard duty or out patrolling, you know, you had downtime where you could play cards or horseshoes or do whatever.
And what was the way of communicating with family back in the U.S. at that time?
By mail. We were receiving mail at that time, and so that was always good. Mail call.
Well, then you completed your service. What kind of work were you doing in Germany toward the end of your service?
We were just doing your typical training. You know, daily activities would be PT, and then you'd do some classroom training as far as vehicle identification and weapons and everything of that nature. And then maybe once or twice a year you'd go to a training facility with your vehicle and do actual maneuvers. And then you'd have live fire exercises. And
did you have any thought that you might be returned to a battle scene?
No, that never was. Like I said, because at that point the ceasefire had been called, and everything seemed to be under control.
So then you're discharged from the military and you come back.
Right.
What was that reentry experience like for you?
It was fairly good. Said I came back to Fairhope, and I went here to Faulkner for a year until I figured out that I was going to go to Auburn, and so I went to Auburn in '94, and did 3 years there, and then graduated in '97.
So the experience of coming home was a fairly smooth experience. There wasn't a great deal of emotional trauma.
No, there wasn't.
For you.
Not for me. No, there was not. It went very smooth.
Now, as you sit here today and tell us about this experience, and you think of the high school graduate who went off to Germany and saw snow for the first time in his life, and then was in the middle of the desert. I'm sure that was a stunning set of experiences for you. How has it shaped your life or influenced you as a person?
It matured me real quick. Like I said, I had my 19th birthday in the desert, so I was still young, and it made me focus on what I wanted to do with my life. Got to Auburn and graduated. You know, when I got back, I was concerned that I'd lost 2 or 3 years of where I wanted to be in my life. You know, my friends are 3 years into college, and I'm just starting. You know, what have I done? Well, turns out I graduated before some of them, so I didn't lose too much time. And when I got to school, I was focused on the education. I'd kind of done my partying and gotten it out of my system.
And the military experience that now was in your background. Have you maintained contact with the people with whom you served?
I stay in contact with a few of them, not as many as I like, but that's maybe one of the good things about Facebook is I have been able to get in touch with some people that I hadn't been able to otherwise.
Have you had a kind of personal reunion with any of them?
No, I have not had a personal reunion. I just had the 20-year reunion of the actual service, so I was able to contact a few of them and touch base and say I can't believe it's been 20 years since we were together.
I'm interested in how you think of the value of military service at this period in our history. If there was a young man or a young woman graduating from high school who had the same kind of need that you described for some structure, discipline, would you recommend a military experience to a young person today?
Absolutely. I think it should be mandatory, 2 years. It'll give you a lot more sense of pride of the nation we have, and I think 2 years.
For men and women?
For men and women.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Give an option on what they want to serve as far as their MOS, but some of them will be combat related and some wouldn't have to be combat related, but I think it would give everybody a good sense of the country.
And you mentioned that at the time that you had your actual combat experience, you had been trained as a soldier, but there hadn't been much presented to you about why the United States was there, what our country's interests were, and so forth. As you've looked back on what was for some a wounding experience, happily not as many as now, but do you get a sense of where your work and the work of your colleagues fit into the objectives of our country?
Yes, I do. I do believe we did the right thing.
Mm-hmm. So I guess what you're saying is that 2 years of military service made you a stronger and better person. You would recommend it for everybody, and that not only would that be good for the country, but they would be stronger and better individuals and citizens.
Absolutely. I've got a nephew that's about to go in the Army. He's 21 and hasn't had the best direction. He's tried school a little bit and he's tried work and not sure what he wants to do, and he's about to go into the Army, so very proud of him.
Good. Is there anything else at all that you would like to say while we are doing this? Anything that you hoped would be asked that hasn't been, or any thoughts that you've had either before coming or during the discussion that you would like the record to have?
No, I think it's a great project and very proud to be included in it.
Well, and we are proud to include you. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Ed.
Good.
Oh, that was
Okay.
wonderful.